I also teach at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, and previously I have taught at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. I also led Climate Policy Initiatives India office. So let me get started with my talk. Let me talk now. So today I'm going to talk about this issue of retirement of expensive coal plants. So let's get started. And the context is that, and it's a comparison between solar capacity and the coal capacity, or the economics of solar versus coal. And as we all know, given the ambitious policies of government of India, as well as the reduction in the cost of solar panels, solar capacity in India is increasing exponentially. And this is all in the context of the 175 gigawatt renewable energy capacity by 2022, or even the more recent target of, or aspiration of, around 450 gigawatts of renewable capacity by 2030. And the idea here is to show is that solar capacity is increasing. The graph is only until 2017, so it's a little bit dated. At that point, we had more than 15 gigawatts of solar capacity. Now, at this point, or at the middle of this year, the solar capacity was around 35 gigawatts, or slightly more than that. But obviously, we need to get to 100 gigawatts in about a couple of years. So there's still a lot more to go. And one of the questions is, how can we get more solar energy deployed? And as I said, this is in the context of the price, or what we call the solar tariff, declining very quickly over time. In the beginning, you see this big fall. It was largely due to policy, because we moved from a feed-in tariff to a reverse auction mechanism. And then, over time, we have also seen declines, including from the start. And one other major factor is just the capital expenditure, or the cost of the solar panels going down. And again, this is slightly old data, and we're seeing a solar tariff, or the solar levelized cost of somewhere around 2.5. I think this is around the time when we had the REVA auction, and so this is reflecting that. And as you might know, these tariffs have fallen further now, and we are right now sitting at around 2 rupees per kilowatt hour, and it continues to fall as before. So what are the implications of this tariff? And this is where kind of our kind of talk starts. And what we start to see is that over time, and this is over time, as solar energy was getting cheaper in terms of levelized cost, or average cost of generation, it first became cheaper than and obviously it's nice to compare with fossil fuel based generation, and in India's case it's mostly coal, because we don't have that much gas. First, the comparison was with foreign or imported coal, and coal solar became cheaper than imported coal, and this was all a levelized cost, or the average cost comparison. After that, as the solar energy cost kept on going down, solar even became less expensive than new domestic coal, and again in levelized cost, which is the average cost of generation. Now what's starting to happen is something even more interesting, and this is what I want you to pay attention to, that now new solar is cheaper than the variable cost, and it's the variable cost of coal generation of existing coal plants. So that's where we've gotten to. So the average cost of generation, or the levelized cost of generation from new solar, is cheaper than the variable cost of generation from existing coal. And it's not true for all coal plants. If you have a pithead coal plant which is close to the coal mine, um, that coal power is going to be pretty cheap. Whereas if there's a coal that's far away, or a coal power plant that's far away from a coal mine, that coal power is going to be more expensive. And obviously, there are other elements that go into the variable cost of coal generation, but the fuel cost is the primary one. And so, what this graph is showing is that it's basically uh, it's really a graph um, of cumulative capacity on the x-axis and cumulative coal capacity on the x-axis, and the variable costs on the y-axis. And as you can see, what I was talking about, the variation in the variable costs. And then I also drew a line at around 2.44, which used to be the cheapest solar tariff when I wrote this paper. And you can see that approximately 100 gigawatt of coal generation capacity has a variable cost that's higher than this horizontal line, which is the average cost of solar, or the levelized cost of solar, which results in the solar tariff. Now, what are the implications of that? Right? And the implications of that is that even if I forget the fixed cost or the sunk cost of these coal plants, which is typically how you make economic decisions. Even if I look forward, if I'm comparing buying energy from new solar versus existing coal, the economic decision is to buy it from new solar, right? Because new solar, even on average cost basis, is cheaper than running the coal plant and paying that variable cost. So this about 100 gigawatt, and it could be more now. I don't need to run that capacity anymore. Okay, and that means I could basically do even more solar. So that was the one key takeaway that of the simple analysis, is that on the basis of just this simple observation of solar levelized cost versus the variable cost of coal, we can say that about 100 gigawatt of coal capacity is no longer needed. Okay, and then the obvious conclusion is that maybe that coal capacity should be retired. Okay, and obviously that has implications for obviously in terms of cost, that you could save money right away on per unit of energy that you buy, but also there are implications from an environmental perspective. Okay, so and from both of these perspectives, it's a win-win situation. And then you can make this analysis more nuanced. If of that 100 gigawatt capacity, and the question is, where does that capacity lie today? And you can see a lot of that capacity is in Uttar Pradesh. A lot of that capacity is in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, etc. Right? So this also breaks down by state. Now, one other thing I want to talk about before I talk about the practical aspects of this kind of coal retirement, or what we call the expensive brownfield coal retirement. I kind of said that you can start saving money by buying energy, right, from day one. And that's the difference between the variable cost of coal and the average cost of solar. You can save even more money if you retire this coal capacity and you pay off the original investors, which is either private investors or public investors, through a bond. And that bond could be raised by the state government, by the DISCOM, or a combination of the two, to pay off the original developers, and especially the private developers. And in that process, when you raise a bond, the cost of capital of the bond is typically going to be much cheaper than the cost of capital of somebody putting up, or somebody who is investing in a coal plant. Okay, and you can look at the CERC orders for what's the cost of capital that's assumed under coal contract. So if you could do that, if you could raise a bond and pay off the existing consumers, or existing investors, then again, even though you mean the discom might be under a contract, which is typically a capacity contract, to pay for the installed capacity to the developer, that cost of paying the developer suddenly goes down because now you have raised a bond. Okay. So that is another saving you can get to, and this bond again can be paid by what we call ratepayer surcharges. If you remember and if you recall, um, the idea here is that the original coal plant was under a capacity contract anyways, and the consumers or the retail consumers or the buyers were on the hook for paying for that capacity anyways, and now they have to pay less. But now what you can do is you can say, hey, this is a surcharge, it's going into a special purpose vehicle that's going to be used to pay the bond. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And you can show on the basis of when you retire the coal plant, a coal plant which is retired at 5 years of its life, or 10 years, or 15 years, or 20 years, you could have savings on the debt investor side and the equity investor side, and also on the total combined investor side. And these are percentage numbers on what was still due to the investor, any kind of investor, and how much of the saving that you got because of issuing this bond. For example, if I retire a coal plant at 5 years, I'm going to save about 5.37% on the debt payment that I am still obligated to on the capacity contract, and I means discom or the consumer, therefore. And so that similarly on equity side, we could save about 74%, and overall you could save 31%. So you can see that the savings can be significant. So just to sum it up, if you could retire these kind of expensive brownfield coal plants, from an economic perspective, it's kind of you save on the variable cost on day one, and then if you get into this idea which is called securitization or bond securitization, it has been used extensively in the US, and in other places you can save even more on the capacity contract part. This is that was the good news and the easy part of the analysis. And now you start to get into this whole issue of implementation. Is it even possible to do? And multiple questions come up. One of the questions, and what I'm going to do is I've listed some of the questions. I'm going to go through these questions quickly. There could be more questions as and when and if you get involved with doing something like that, and kind of talk a little bit about how would you approach these questions, right? And the first question is obviously, hey, if you start retiring coal and you start buying solar, look, it's not an apples to apples comparison because coal actually provides system level services, right? And it's baseload power. So is this a good decision? And the answer to that is, of course, you cannot just replace coal with solar in all aspects. But what you need to look at is, as a system level, can I manage? Can I meet supply? Can I meet demand reliably with the supply I have? And a lot of the ongoing analysis shows that a lot of the coal capacity that exists today may not be needed for even for balancing purposes. And so again, you have to figure out an intersection of the two sets, of the set of the coal plant that I came up with and the set of coal plants that you may not need for flexibility services, etc., and figure out what are these coal plants. And so that work is still ongoing by many other people. There's a question around, can we actually legally renegotiate the existing plant contracts? Because I said, hey, we have to pay off the existing investors. And yes, and the answer is it is possible, and precedent exists in India, both infrastructure projects and coal projects, and especially like if you look at the Tata Mundra project, it was renegotiated, right? So it's all possible. Another question is, hey, there's a discom liability where you're liable for paying the capacity contract. Can you actually convert them to bonds for discoms or for state? And the answer is yes, it's been done. And for Uday, now the question is, can we still do it? So again, a lot of details here, but all the news looks like it's promising, right? Then there's a question of how would you pay the bonds, and I already talked about you could have a ratepayer surcharge. And then the final question, which is really important, which is jobs. And here, what I would like to say is that I have done some new work, and it is a working paper on SSRM. I have just submitted it to a journal, and the idea is that yes, there are job losses, and we need to worry about job losses. But those job losses can be kind of dealt with by perhaps repurposing the existing coal plants for new solar, new batteries, other things you could do, and still employ the people. Uh, and so the people issues can be addressed, and this is part of this new paper that we have just worked on. And there could be other issues as well. So, anyways, I hope this was an interesting talk for you. At least, at the very least, it has given you something to think about, and hopefully, it gives you some interesting questions to work on. As I said, I apologize for not being there real time, but happy to take any questions over email or through the organizers. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.